Dis After Dark Podcast is sponsored by Unofficial.com, the home of Halloween Horror Nights news and rumors all year round. Find us on the web at www.hhnunofficial.com. So stop the fog machines and clear the cobwebs. It's time for another episode of the podcast that's nearly the same as all the others.
Warning. This show contains childish adult content and is intended for immature, mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. The views spoken are ours and ours alone, not those of any other bugger. If you're easily offended, we strongly suggest finding another podcast. Everybody neat and pretty, then on with the show.
Hello and welcome to this latest edition of Dis After Dark. I'm quite obviously not your host, Nick. Nick can't be with us tonight, as can't most of the team, actually. It's just me and Craig.
Good evening, everyone. I'm actually just opening a can of Belgium's finest, Stella Artois. It's a special occasion tonight.
I'm not actually drinking because I ran 8k this morning, so kind of just trying to top up my fluids today rather than adding alcohol. But it's not just me and Craig. We also have a very special guest, I think we can say. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay. I'm Jim Hill, and I forgot that we could drink adult beverages during this show. I'm sitting here with mango iced tea like a wimp.
That would work with vodka, that, Jim.
Oh, well, there you go. So
I think the plan tonight for this episode, it's gonna, as I said, it's a bit of a special one. We're gonna kind of look at what's coming to the Disney parks in the next year, or even a bit more in the future, I think, as well, we would say, wouldn't we, Craig?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we know the bullet points of what's coming in 2017, but I was interested to bring Jim on to talk about what the bullet points actually mean, what's below the bullet points, what are the rides going to be like in Pandora, what are all the little things, the upsells that are going on at Disney, are they going to continue to roll out, and maybe what the Disney parks will look like in 5 years' time.
okay, well, hang on. I'm reaching for the crystal ball in my. Can I borrow Doctor Strange's cape? We were just talking about Doctor Strange. We both really like that film. So
yeah. So as Craig mentioned, I think the major elephant in the room. Bit of a pun, bit of a bad Nick pun there. But Animal Kingdom, I think, is the big thing that everybody's looking towards. Obviously, Avatar, the world of Pandora, or Pandora, the world of Avatar, even got it the wrong way around there, and Rivers of Light, which obviously we've been waiting for quite a while. So, Jim, what can you tell us about those?
Well, let's just cut to the chase. I mean, there's a real level of frustration at the management level at the Walt Disney World Resort that Rivers of Light has still not made it out of the gate. And it's honestly not for the reasons you might think. Look, they built the infrastructure, the 500-seat stadium, and that's going to serve that park for decades coming, and in fact, what's kind of funny is that, to hear the people at the resort talk, it's just sort of like, why the hell didn't we just wait and do a Moana show? I mean, it's just sort of like, they're on boats, and it's water and it would have worked perfectly. But, they have to wait, I guess, for Rivers of Light to recover its investment, which is now going to take a couple of years because obviously they had to do a lot of work once it couldn't make its April 2016 debut date. But yeah, the real reason that people at that park are frustrated that nighttime show has yet to open. In fact, what's interesting now is I'm hearing that they're looking to try to have it actually open come March. But there's a reason for that. They want to have practice at that park with keeping 5,000 plus people in line waiting for the second show, so that they can then use that experience to handle the crowds that will come back to Pandora at night to check out the bioluminescence. Because that's really the fear right now, is that this land of the park will reach capacity and they're going to have to hold guests out at night because everyone's going to want to come back and see the amazing bioluminescent forest. And so that was always kind of the long-term plan. That's why Rivers of Light was supposed to open in 2016 and give them an entire summer of learning how to do crowd control at that park, holding large groups of people and then shuttling them in and out of the area, and then to directly pivot and use that experience come the spring, summer of 2017 when, Pandora, the World of Avatar opens. And now, at best, they're going to have maybe a 3-month window to get this right. Because right now, from what I've been told, we really shouldn't expect to see Avatar open till July, in fact, late July. So, in fact, I want to caution everybody who there was this story or this rumor that made the rounds about a week, 10 days ago about there was a special pass that was being offered to Florida residents. And there was this blackout period in the middle of when they were offering it. Everyone would go, aha, that's when, Pandora's going to open, and let me book my vacation around that. And it's like, guys, just learn the lesson of Rivers of Light. Don't, that's not what that blackout period is about. More to the point, you really don't want to try to be the first people through the door at this place, because I mean, God help you. Imagine what it would feel like to, for example, for you guys to fly all the way over from the UK on a hunch and to just stand outside the fence there at Tiffin's. And it's like, sorry, guys, not open. Go drink your sorrows at the bar there. So
this land, Jim, in scale-wise, how big is it compared to Harry Potter or the new Fantasyland expansion?
Well, it's actually, if you go from New Fantasyland, that's a good parallel. If you go from, say, the faux castle gates, and take in all of the land that goes all the way back, and then over to, say, where the Mad Teacups or the Mad Tea Party teacups are, that's pretty much the size. Of course, but the deal of this is that for so much of it, you are just walking through a jungle. In fact, you can remember that you're going to have the very same language that you have for the rest of Animal Kingdom. This is a park of discovery, so you've got to walk along this path. Now, what's kind of cool about these two paths that lead in and out of Pandora, the one, again, that comes in via the Tiffins, and the other one that will go in next to Legend of the Lion King, from that side. You're going to travel past standard Disney theme park, Central Florida type growth, which gradually gives way to lots of stuff that you've seen from the James Cameron film. The different plant life, different, and more to the point, if you there's going to be a full audio program where you're going to be hearing off in the distance, large creatures moving through the brush or cries or that sort of thing. But it's, as you make your way through the forest, you eventually arrive at the floating mountains. And this is where it gets kind of cool. I mean, these things are 146 feet tall. It's not a question of you stand in one spot and look at them. You can actually walk under them, around them. I keep getting mixed signals about whether or not they're actually going to move and drift. I guess that was originally the plan, and now it's one of these things where I it's always fun when you get the Disney attorneys involved, and it's just sort of like, that may be a safety issue, and maybe we should just keep them static and in place. But these things were originally designed to have a little bit of sway and movement to them. That a lot of those vines that you're looking at are actually pieces of structural steel that are supposed to allow them to pivot and give the illusion of these things shifting in the wind. But yeah, I mean, you will be, when you're down inside of Pandora and literally these mountains are floating up over your head and you're surrounded by the jungle and the wreckage from the Marine base, this is going to be a pretty impressive environment.
Do you think, are they going to have a drink? Are they, Harry Potter style? Are they going to have a butterbeer? Are they going to have food in there? Have there been any restaurants announced inside?
Well, at the old staff, the Marine base cafeteria is supposedly now going to be run by the native people. And in fact, actually, at the D23 Expo last year, I was talking with Joe Rohde and the folks there, and they are crafting, the idea is that you're going to be in a situation where it tastes just like chicken, because it is chicken, but it's chicken that they've dyed and manipulated, and same thing with vegetables. You're going to have this platter of odd-looking food that you've actually had before, but, thanks to the way it's prepared, the way it's cut, the various spices or completely safe food dyes that they use, you're going to get, supposedly an authentic, Pandora dining experience. I don't think there's anything quite on the line of butterbeer. But speaking of which, though, I did hear that they finally locked the flavor for the blue milk for Star Wars experience, and that's definitely going to be something that's offered in the various cantinas and restaurants at both of the Star Wars experiences when they open in 2019, maybe 2020. So,
yeah. We had one last question from one of our other hosts that can be here today, Mr. Dolan. His question about Avatar was: has Disney had any influence over the following scripts that are coming for these future films? Has what they've done in the parks actually had any influence over Cameron's scripts?
That's kind of funny. Someone trying to influence James Cameron. Look, I will tell you flat out. Look, if there's a lot of Imagineers who, frankly, you got to remember this project was announced 5 years ago, and it turned out to be this slow motion collaboration because James Cameron's a very busy guy. He's constantly climbing into submersibles and going down into the Mariana Trench, and more to the point, he was, when things weren't going his way, he would sort of freeze them out. He'd give them a silent treatment, and they, just getting him to sign off on the land was hard enough, let alone, hey, let's offer some notes on the movies. I mean, yeah, there is a certain level of concern at Disney that, there are these, 3 follow-up films to Avatar and then supposedly a prequel coming. And, the concern is, well, what if, something really horrible pops up in the films? What if something controversial? What if, they're especially dark or violent? Is that going to impact things? And it's like, it's out of their control. There's nothing they can do. That James is going to make the movies that he wants to make that are set in the Avatar universe, and the Disney theme park, that Disney's Animal Kingdom will have this one land that, again, the mantra Disney keeps telling themselves is it's the highest grossing film in Hollywood history. We're very smart to have this, that, and particularly when the new prequels and sequels will come out, this will definitely be a smart investment. But if you talk with the Imagineers, they flat out admit, look, if we had known 6 months later after we made this deal that George Lucas was going to sell, Lucasfilm to Disney and that we could then do Star Wars lands, we would have never made this deal. But nobody knew that was in the wings. And they were really looking for a way to turbocharge Animal Kingdom, which was, the fourth by a long distance of the parks in Orlando. And one of the things, again, that it's not a coincidence that, they built Rivers of Light and, the Avatar with its bioluminescent nighttime lighting package. They want to have this park actually extend its operating hours a good 5 or 6 hours a day. So it can then do at least Disney Studios business. I mean, when they were initially spending, they were like, it could be as popular as the Magic Kingdom. And it's like, no, you're high. That's never going to happen. But of course, the irony is now, you have your $1 billion Zootopia film, and it's just sort of like, why, again, just thinking about the amount of money that's been spent on Pandora and what they could have done related to Zootopia with that exact same amount of money. In fact, to be honest, Zootopia is still coming to that park that we should expect, in fact, maybe in time for the 50th anniversary, but that's probably a little ambitious. But Rafiki's Planet Watch, that whole area just goes away, but the train system stays in place, so that people can, in fact, it's Disney once again being influenced by Harry Potter. It in a Hogwarts Express-like experience, you'll board the train, you'll ride to Zootopia, looking out the windows, and then you'll get out in a land, where Rafiki's Planet Watch was built, that gives you that Zootopia experience. So, but again, that's a couple of years down the line.
It's almost like the animals are getting phased out of Animal Kingdom.
Well, let's be honest. Animals are a pain in the ass, all right?
Yeah.
They poop, they bite people. And in fact, it's so funny we're recording this today because I don't know if you heard, but just last night, Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey here in the States announced that they are closing both of their they're shutting down their two touring circuses in May of this year because after they took the elephants out of the show last year, attendance plummeted. People just didn't want to buy tickets to a traveling circus that didn't have elephants. And but at the same time, that Barnum and Bailey had been fighting this more than a decade long battle with animal rights folks about the animals they had on display, and this was kind of like what SeaWorld just did. I mean, they just in the past week or so, they shut down in San Diego their killer whale show. And it is going to be fascinating to see if a SeaWorld can reinvent itself and still draw crowds without killer whales, because face it, that's their logo, that's their brand. So
I think on that note, I think Avatar, we've talked about that quite a bit. Going on to something else that you've already mentioned, Jim, Star Wars Land. It can't be ignored. There's huge building sites in both parks at the moment. You've already mentioned a possible opening date. Are they both going to open at the same time? Or is there going to be
no.
We didn't think they would be.
No. California is going to try to be the first to open. In fact, it's kind of interesting. You may have heard in just in the past week, there's this thing that's being tested called MaxPass. They've announced that you will be able, for a simple $10 fee, to book in advance. And it's intriguing that what they did in both parks is they picked a ride that had been in the past. Hadn't been on the FastPass system. You have Toy Story Midway Mania, which has 2 tracks, and you have the Matterhorn bobsleds in Disneyland Park, which has 2 tracks. And it really isn't a coincidence that this is being done as a test for California, because the genuine fear is that when they open Star Wars Experience, or whatever the new name of the land is, the crowds are going to be so huge that that they're going to have to create some way of people absolutely guaranteeing, for example, their opportunity to fly the Millennium Falcon or have the escape from the Stormtroopers experience. And and in both cases, it's a notion of, okay, there's a standby version, and there'll also be a MaxPass version, which you can buy in advance. And I don't know. I'm really not a fan of these upcharge things. I think they I get it. It's if you talk with people in the company, it's like, look, Star Wars Experience is close to $1 billion for both resorts. That's how hyper detailed, and again, you're going to have buildings that are 7 stories tall, towering over you. That you're going to be totally enveloped in this world. Though, again, just this past week, Disney had to break the news that they're going to be pulling the balloon off of the Muppet Vision 3D movie because they were doing some height tests and realized from inside the supposedly all-encompassing Star Wars universe, you could still see the balloon on top of that building. So down it comes. So, but yeah, California will open first, and then on the heels of that, Florida will open. But of course, before Florida's Star Wars Land opens, we then get Toy Story Land.
Yeah, that was something I'd completely forgotten about, was Toy Story Land. So where's that in the plans? Because that always seemed to be coming first, as you've just said, but there's not really been much said about it, obviously, because Star Wars has kind of overshadowed it.
Well, it's kind of a, forgive me for, this is probably not the best way to describe it, but it's an add-on. Basically, think about it. We were just talking about Toy Story Midway Mania, that Disney's California Adventure. You have the Toy Story Mania that the studios in Florida has, that just recently added the 3rd track. But the way this is going to work is, instead of walking up the that narrow road there into Pixar Place and walking through what used to be the old front door of Midway Mania, there's a brand new entrance that's going to be crafted around to the back of the building that'll get you into the queue of all 3 tracks. And that'll actually be facing into Toy Story Land. And then you'll have your Slinky Dog Racer and your little green Army-mint spinner and an L Toys barn and a food experience. It's compared to what they're doing for the Star Wars Experience. It's going to be a little bare bones, but at the same time, it's going to have very large kid appeal. And what people also need to understand is that from the moment that Star Wars Experience opens, that whole area that used to be the studio's Magic of Disney Animation, walkthrough experience, where Launch Bay is right now, that goes down, and it kind of depends on, which property, IP that the company's excited about. I've heard several different iterations of the plan. The one that they seem to keep circling back on is a Monsters Inc. Area, and then you have two very popular Pixar properties side by side. You have the Toy Story Land, and then you have Monstropolis, and it's going to be interesting. That will then give this park that much more of a strong kid appeal. And then, of course, when Star Wars Experience comes online, you have this giant-sized land with restaurants and shops and two strong attractions and a large piece of property held back for a third yet to be determined ride. They're actually kind of hoping in the tradition of Rogue One that one of these Star Wars stories might lend itself to, sort of a timeless attraction. But I think that's the other thing people need to understand about, the whole conceit behind the Star Wars Experience, that this is, this whole theming of the land where it's supposed to be, a port city out on the rim of the galaxy. It's deliberately designed to be a loose construct. They want, when you go into this space, they want you, if you're someone my age, you're 57-year-old. I mean, I saw Star Wars, the first one, New Hope. I had just graduated from high school, like the day before, and went to go see it. So that as old farts, the 40 years, who want to see the original characters, this land is loose enough that you could see some of those. But at the same time, if you are, say, a kid today who loves Star Wars Rebels, the animated series that runs on the Disney XD, they want you to be, this area to be loose enough time-wise that those characters could appear. And, if, the young Han Solo or the Boba Fett film that they're making, they want to be able that you could meet those characters well. But in addition to that, I mean, there's these shops and restaurants where some of the ideas that Disney's trying to do here are just crazy. Like, I mean, have you heard the whole concept of, each shop is supposed to be run by a family of aliens that actually lives overhead over the store? I mean, supposedly their apartments are upstairs. And so every shop will have, the people who work in the shop will have a makeup treatment, and they'll have to wear clothes that, sort of makes them look like they're all the members of the same family. I mean, again, it's so funny. You look at this and just look at it straightforward, and it's Disney definitely responding to Potter. And what's so funny is that Universal's, Universal's not even sweating this. They are just charging so far ahead now. There's their new big play is, of course, the Nintendo land, and from what I'm hearing, a Nintendo park. And yeah, it's going to be interesting in Orlando and to a lesser extent out in Southern California, over the next decade.
I think with the Star Wars was always a boys' brand. It was for the boys. My Grace is 8 tomorrow, and she is absolutely balmy for Star Wars. After the New Hope last year with Rey.
Oh, sure.
She's a hero. She's having a Star Wars birthday tomorrow. We've just had a celebration today with the family. It was all Star Wars decorations. She's got a Death Star light going up in her bedroom tomorrow when she opens it for her present. She's absolutely balmy. I think Star Wars is going to smash Harry Potter out of the water. I don't think Disney realise or appreciate how big this is going to be.
Well, don't get me wrong. I have to tell you, you've just made somebody in Disney's consumer products day. I mean, somebody's opening a bottle right now and toasting you because that's exactly what they wanted to hear. In fact, it's, when you think about Rey or you think about Jyn in Rogue One, the fact that they've been able to do this, to take a boy's brand and expand it to a boy and a girl brand. But don't underestimate Potter. I mean, between, face it, we're still there's supposedly 4 more Fantastic Beasts films coming, and Universal's already snagged the theme park rights to that film franchise. So don't be surprised if the New York area of at least Universal Studios, Florida, suddenly, you see Newt Scamander and company, show up in some way. But, the deal that was announced last year that took the Disney had the rights to air all of the Harry Potter films on what used to be the ABC Family Channel here in the States. It's now known as Freeform. But they lost the rights coming in 2018, and they're now shifted to NBC Universal's Sci-Fi cable channel. And suppose if you drill down into the agreement, they not only got Fantastic Beasts, but they also got the film rights to the trilogy that's going to be based on the stage play that's playing in London right now, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. And in fact, what is it? Within the past month, they've actually nailed the rights to a theater in New York that will do the same thing. To play this 2-part play till they run out of people who are tired of waiting to get tickets for Hamilton. So yeah, I mean, Potter's an ongoing concern, and I think it's going to be interesting. If you talk with the people at Universal Creative, they are definitely looking for ways to continue to expand both in Florida and Hollywood and Japan. In fact, Potter over there, I don't know if you've heard, for some odd reason, they can do stuff over in Japan in their Wizarding World that they can't do at either of the States places. I mean, have you heard about the Death Eater thing they did for Halloween?
Yeah, we've heard, haven't we? And
yeah,
what? Why? What's?
I'm not entirely sure. I've made inquiries, and in fact, what's interesting when you talk with the folks stateside, I mean, they'll tell you about how JK initially was very dead set about, look, when you do the Halloween Horror Nights, people can't go into Diagon Alley because it's, we're not, yes, there are Death Eaters, but, this isn't supposed to be a genuinely frightening place. And so to have them making the appearance in Japan, I just wonder, is this in fact a trial run for, just to see whether or not they can bring it stateside? I guess we'll have to see come Halloween, but actually it's Halloween Horror Nights at Universal starts late August, early September. So yeah, we'll have to wait, 7 or 8 months yet.
Do you think have you been to a Halloween Horror Nights recently, Jim?
Yes, I have. That's the folks at Universal are nice enough to invite me down every year, and it's just, I mean, I think I've talked about this before. The thing about when you do it like on a press night is they march you at high speed from house to house to house to house, and so you don't get the experience of where you're standing outside for an hour and you're sort of building up the anticipation, and and in fact, what's kind of terrible about it is because you go from house to house to house, by the second or third house of the night, you're kind of familiar with the visual language. So you're like, okay, I'm walking into a dark room. There's a big thing in front of me, which means that the teenager who's going to jump out and try to scare me is to my left. And, sure enough, that's how it is. I get, but yeah, they do some amazing things. That this past year there was some stagecraft and some mazes that were just, some of the best stuff they've ever done. But at the same time, I mean, it's kind of a night where it's like, especially, I remember doing the what is it, the American Horror Story maze, and it was like I forget the name of the clown from the the series 3 or series 4, and
Twisty.
They did this Twisty. Oh my God, they did this thing where you're leaving the maze and you think you're done, and it's like, oh, there's Twisty. Okay, good. That's but there were 2 more versions of that clown before you got out of the maze. And it was like, the first one lulled you into a false sense of security. And then it was like, oh, another one. And then it's like, okay, I'm absolutely, another clown. So it's like, I'm just glad I was wearing my complimentary Halloween Horror Night adult diaper. So.
Well, do you think, what would the Death Eaters do to the footfall would it detract from Halloween Horror Nights, or would it add to it? Do you think maybe it was Halloween Horror Nights who have put the blocks on the Death Eaters?
I think a secondary issue might be the fact of guest flow. I mean, think about it. If you look at the footage for Japan, they just appear and they move through the crowd. I mean, there's this huge bank of fog and the music, and they move through the crowd in a dramatic fashion, sort of jinxing people and slamming curses left and right, and then they're gone. But when you think about, there are nights on Halloween Horror Nights when there were 10, 15, 20,000 people crammed into that park. And how would you queue people up to do that? I don't know. That's the other thing about, so many of these events or circling back on Star Wars Experience. It's like we all want to go to the cantina and hang out with the aliens there and have a drink. But it's like, you can't build a cantina that's big enough for everybody to have that sort of intimate experience. In fact, that's one of the things the Imagineers were dealing with when they're building or designing the Star Wars Experience. They realized that what they needed to create was, instead of a bar that could comfortably sit, 50 or 60, and give them that, experience from New Hope, that what they needed to create was something that looked like it, and in fact that was more reminiscent of what we saw in The Force Awakens, but some place that seats 300 to 500.
That's not the same experience, is it?
No, but the thinking is that if you create 4 and 5 rooms that are hyper detailed, and again, if you commit to the concept that you need no less than 5 and 6 characters from the films walking around at any one time in any one of these spaces. That's the other thing when you talk with folks at Disney about, the recent upcharges, the experiments with like the cabanas, or the, paying the extra fee to take a bus from inside the park that'll take you directly to one of the other parks. And they're like, do you understand how truly expensive, Star Wars Experience is to build and what it's cost to maintain that? I mean, it's just, we need to have these streams up and running, because that sort of guest experience is going to be hugely expensive on a day-to-day basis.
Hello, dear listener. It's Nick of the After Dark Podcast Network. We hope you're enjoying this podcast, and we'll get back to it very, very soon. I just want to take a few minutes to let you know that we have a website at the moment that's at www.patreon.com/Dis After Dark. Now, what that is a website where you are able to support this podcast, Universal After Dark, and Pop After Dark. I've been hosting Dis After Dark now for coming up to 5 years, and pretty much enjoyed every minute. But unfortunately, as well as giving up our time to record these podcasts, they're not free to host. All of this stuff does cost money. If you are willing or able to make a donation to help support our podcast, it'd be very much appreciated. If you visit patreon.com/Dis After Dark, and we've got a few tiers there of things that you can donate to, and there are some rewards available depending on the level of donation. Anything you are able to donate will really be appreciated. This isn't a way for us to get rich and give up our day jobs, because that's not going to happen. This is purely about making sure that we can continue to make these podcasts going forward. So thank you for your time. Hope you've enjoyed this podcast and all our others. And if you can support us, it'll be great. Once again, that website is patreon.com/Dis After Dark. Thank you.
Well, I mean, talking about these upcharges, they just seem to be throwing them out there at the moment and seeing what sticks. I believe have the cabanas been withdrawn now, or?
Well, that depends on who you talk to. Yes, that they are supposedly discontinuing them in their current form come February. However, you have to understand that part of this was just a test. That, and in fact, there is a redo of Walt Disney World's at the Magic Kingdom of Tomorrowland in the works. I mean, we've all heard about the Wreck-It Ralph ride that's, making its way through the system and will replace Stitch's Great Escape. But there's another, that whole side of the park is going to get, kind of a reconfiguration. And one of the things that they were supposedly talking about was building permanent cabanas that are out of the public view. But that, in fact, one plan, and it's just kind of startling, would be to put them up on one of the rooftops in Tomorrowland, because then guests, the people who rented them would have this amazing view of the castle and the projection show, but also the fireworks. The downside is, I guess, when they were talking about the original site, it was like, well, this is where Tinkerbell lands, and, that kind of spoils the magic for the folks in the cabanas, and especially the concern of them getting photographs of, them because that's the thing. Tinkerbell comes sliding down that thing, and they hold up a mattress for her to smash into to slow her down, and I don't know for your cabana fee that's really what you'd want, but yeah, I mean, this
I'll
is
be
the
honest,
modern
Jim.
Disney company. Yeah,
If I was a local resident and an annual pass holder, and my daughter, who's 8, or Eve, who's 13, wanted a party, I would pay out for a cabana. I don't have a problem with it. Everybody seems to be enraged and angry and offended nowadays whenever Disney try and do anything different. What do you think? Do you think?
Well, I mean, Len and I have actually talked about this. In fact, Len has a slide from a presentation that was done for travel agents last year, where basically Disney talked about their new battle plan for the resorts, where they pursue the rich and the richer. That it's all about going after, the upper tier of customer, and again, creating all of these add-ons that would appeal to, the customer that really wants the truly special, Disney World vacation experience. Now, look, if people are willing to spend the money for these sorts of things, and again, if it's something to please a family member or that sort of thing, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. My problem is a guy who's been writing about Disney for 30 plus years at this point. I've talked with a lot of Imagineers who, for example, talk about how Walt fought, back when you used to pay to get on Disney rides, when they had the ticket books. He, it was like, and he fought them. It was like, look, the carousel is always only going to be 10 cents because I want at least one ride that people who don't have a whole lot of money can ride. And Walt was always one of these guys who, don't make this about money. We make a lot of money, and there's kind of a famous story about the very first full color Disneyland guidebook, that was made for the parks. And, there's this beautiful thing, the pictures of every land, and it includes in the last page or so all of the rides and shows that were going to be coming in the next year. And at one point, Walt, the financial people sat down with Walt, and it's like, he said, "Oh, I have to ask about the guidebook. How's it doing?" "Oh, it's doing great, but we're losing money." It's like, "What?" And it's like, "Well, you're charging 25 cents, and it costs us 27 cents to print it." And Walt was like, "Well, don't worry about that. That's going to, that's so good looking. That's going to sit on people's coffee tables at home, and they're going to show it to their friends, and their friends are going to be the ones who go, 'Ooh, I want to go to Disneyland.' So we'll make money in the end." But, he was never, a guy who was looking to make money. He figured we'd make enough money. And, for the longest time, people like Dick Nunes, who trained directly under Walt and then went on to run Walt Disney World. I mean, it was Dick Nunes who actually for years vetoed Disney building additional hotels on property. And he flat out said that, look, we have the Contemporary, we have the Golf Resort, we have the Poly, and we have the campgrounds, and and we've got the other 4 hotels over at Hotel Plaza. We don't have to chase every nickel that runs off the table. More to the point, there's just people who have hotels and motels right off property. We want to be a good neighbor. And, as soon as Michael Eisner came through the door, it was like, screw being a good neighbor, and yes, chase every nickel. And yeah, we're now kind of in that squared. Just anything now is on the table in regard to, can we get another revenue stream going? Because, like I said, it's not inexpensive to build a port city out on the rim of the galaxy.
Do you think potentially, I'm a subscriber to Len's tour and plans? We're back in August. Do you think the potential or the future is that I pay Disney for the touring plan?
I hate to say this, but if you look at the history of Disney, I mean, for example, if you look at D23, that was Disney stepping into the space that the National Fantasy Fan Club or the Disney in a Fan Club sat in. That they jumped into that space. So could Disney do that? It's possible. I will tell you that knowing how diligent the guys who do the unofficial guide. In fact, it was so funny once that I don't know if you guys know how Disney does its own, that determines what the wait time is for its attractions. If you heard of the system where basically they hand a pass that's on a lanyard to somebody who's standing in line, they let it come all the way through the line, and then they hand it to the cast member at the front, and they determine, okay, this is how long it took to get here. And so that's the wait time for the attraction, and they update it. And Lynn was telling me one day, said, but you see, the problem with that system, and Disney's never figured this out, is that's what the wait time was when you handed that pass to somebody. That's not what the wait time is right now. That's, that the conditions could have changed completely behind, whenever that person was handed the lanyard and got to the front of the line. And so, when you look at what Disney's actual wait time is on the outside, it's this genuinely flawed system that's always wrong. And, so I hate to say this, but yeah, if Disney ever does a touring plan, I hope they work as hard at getting it right as the touring plan people do, because they are crazy obsessed with, for example, I remember Len talking about, they actually went to the Orlando Sentinel and they bought all of the weather data that paper had recorded and reported for, I want to say, the last 75 to 100 years. So that then their statistical model for what the weather would be on any given day at any time of day for Orlando could feed off of that depth of data. And that impresses me. The fact that they make use of me as one of their experts up at the park, that's the one thing that doesn't impress me. It's like really, that's I'm the expert. It's like, you guys really need to do better. So
if I was at Disney, it was the last day of my holiday, I'm a family of 4, I would pay Disney whatever the fee would be to do every ride at the Magic Kingdom, or a boys package or a girls package at the Magic Kingdom. I would say, take my money and give me. So it's got to be, why haven't they bought touring pans? Why haven't they spoke to Len?
I do not know what to tell you there. I do know that they are looking into, they did a play test. In fact, I remember seeing footage of this at an event. The notion is, if you've been at Walt Disney World for, say, a week-long vacation, and you're looking to end on a high note, they invented this day-long adventure. I'll give you the bare bones of it. Basically, say you're staying at the Grand Floridian, and you get a message in your hotel room that someone needs to meet you in the lobby. And you go down to the lobby, and there's this kind of nefarious character there who explains that, well, look, you're going to the Magic Kingdom today. Could I ask your help? There's a pirate there that I've been trying to get something from, but he won't deal with me. But you're nice people. Perhaps you can persuade him. And so you go to Adventureland, and the family walks around, and sure enough, you wander into a restaurant, and it's not like the guy's out in the open. He's sitting there drinking. And you introduce yourselves, and it turns out that he's actually the hero of the piece, that the gentleman you met back at the hotel is actually the villain. And you then go on this day-long adventure where it turns out there are other families, other teams in the parks, who are having the same adventure. And you have to do things like you stand on shore and wait for the Mark Twain to go by. And your family holds up letters to pass a message to people who are on the Mark Twain, who then send a message back to you. And then you scramble through the park, and you search for clues, and you work with this pirate character. And at the end of the evening, what's really the cool part is that you've collected this magic artifact, and you then leave the Magic Kingdom. You get on a boat. You then travel over to the waterfront at Fort Wilderness, where you witness this this confrontation between your hero and your villain character. The villain character makes the mistake of turning on the icon, and then there's this bank of fog that sweeps up, and an explosion, and when the fog clears, he's gone. But you've stood there and watched him disappear. He's been consumed by some sort of Spielberg-like effect. But it's a magical adventure that could only happen at a Disney theme park or within the bounds of the Magic Kingdom until you leave and you literally get in a boat and travel across the Seven Seas Lagoon to Bay Lake. And that's kind of the stuff they're looking at, that if you wanted to have that magical experience and be in the parks but be outside of what the standard guest experience is, that's what they're looking at.
I'd consider that, but I think I'd want to do 10 fast passes.
Well, but as circling back on what I said about the Halloween Horror Night press experience, be careful what you ask for. Part of the thing of doing 10 attractions in rapid, back to back is it stops being special. It's, if anything, it's like having big handfuls of candy as opposed to, savoring something. I could say it, in fact, one of the things they were talking about in the early days of FastPass is like, they wanted to create, this experience where you could book 8 to 10 fast passes per day. Plus, guaranteed, primo viewing area for the fireworks or a viewing area for the parade. But you were in the park from 8 o'clock in the morning till midnight, because it was like, and of course you're going to have a dining experience, and of course we're going to give you a character experience, and you're going to want to pay for those photographs. And I mean, Disney wanted to capture you all day, and space these experiences, your rides out an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, all with the notion that by doing that, yes, you're having an amazing Disney theme park experience, but B, you're not leaving and going down the street to check out Harry Potter. So.
Hey, Dis After Dark listeners. I want to invite you all to join us over on ScareZone, Halloween Horror Nights podcast. ScareZone is a news, interview, history, and commentary podcast all about Universal's premier Halloween event. It's hosted by fans and experts like me, Logan Seculo, former WWE superstar Scotty 2 Hottie, and Dis After Dark's own Chris Ripley. Subscribe however you get podcasts and head over to scarezone.com for more information. We here at the show are proud supporters of Dis After Dark. And remember, keep your eyes closed and your ears open on ScareZone.
So I think that's that bit we've talked fully about. Just before we move on, I will introduce you. Amanda's now here.
Hi.
Hey, hello, Amanda.
Hi, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
So, moving on, I think the next big thing is the nighttime spectaculars, or lack of in some places. To start with, obviously the use of drones was very popular over the Christmas period with the show at Disney Springs. But also, obviously, there's a lack of nighttime parade now at the Magic Kingdom. And also that Paint the Night's gone down for a major refurb, without really saying what's going on with it, where it's going, whether it's staying where it is, or whether it's moving. And I just wondered if there was anything you could give us on that, Jim.
Okay, well, let's start with the Dreamlights, the drone show that just ended at Disney Springs back on the 8th of this month. If you heard the actual introduction, that they give to the show, they kept using language like an important first step, because this really was kind of a proof of concept. And there's a lot of issues that before we see a full-blown, really impressive drone show, there's a couple of things. One is the show drones that they have right now have only enough battery power to perform for 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes. And that includes the amount of time it takes for them to launch, to get in position, to begin the show, and then to return to base where they power up. Other thing that they discovered the hard way is that when these drones perform over water, it can throw off their GPS technology. I don't know if you've seen any of the videos of the shows where it's kind of fascinating. You'll see like 95% of the drones forming a bird or a Christmas tree or that sort of thing. And then you'll look off to the side and there'll be a couple of drones that are clearly out of place, but are doing the exact same movements. They're following their programming. They just couldn't lock in on the right position to help make the shape. So, given that the drones, the long-term plan was that the drones would appear over World Showcase Lagoon in a new updated version of Illuminations, not being able to hold their GPS positioning, that's a problem. Also, the length of time they can fly, also a problem. But that isn't to say that in 3 to 4 years down the line, they won't have solved that software bug, or they won't have invented newer, lighter, or more powerful drones that can do, can perform that much longer. Nighttime wise, right now, there's a lot of stuff being talked about, but you have to understand that it's being talked about with an eye toward 2021, which is Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary. And, there's kind of an argument in-house about, do we do these shows now, or do we save our Big Bang for the year, of our 50th. And in fact, for me, it's fascinating to watch Main Street Electrical Parade leaving Florida, going to Disneyland, where we'll begin performances on the 20th of this month. If you honestly talk with the folks about involved with Paint the Night, they will flat out tell you that the reason that this was done, in fact, it's kind of an interesting parallel when the Main Street Electric Parade was introduced in the summer of '72 at Disneyland Park. It only ran for 2 years and then went down, was replaced by the American Parade. But one of the reasons it went down is it was basically falling apart. There was so much cutting edge technology, stuff that had never been done before. And this was kind of what happened with Paint the Night, that yes, there had been a similar version of this parade done for Hong Kong, but Steve Davidson and his team had gussied it up a bit, and it just, the costumes were falling apart, the floats were falling apart. They needed to take it backstage and redo it and give it some TLC. So this what's going on now is it's really, just bringing the Main Street Electrical Parade in to give that parade a break for maintenance and doing simple things like trying to figure out how to take some of the weight out of some of the costumes, because there were, there were cast members who were dancing in that parade who wound up with chiropractic issues because it's just some of the light packs and some of the costume pieces were just so heavy.
Yeah, Paint the Night, none of us have managed to see it, have we? None of us have been to California since it started, but it seems like it is that kind of parade that is very technical when you watch it, so it's not a surprise that there's issues with it. Moving on, and I think it's always a big talking point amongst Disney fans and Universal fans, Marvel in the Disney parks. Obviously, we're seeing the movement at California Adventure with Tower of Terror moving over to being Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout. I've heard talk of further Marvel expansions at California Adventure. And obviously the introduction, we saw the first real Marvel character in Orlando, with Doctor Strange making an appearance at the back end of last year. Is there any more talk of Marvel moving into other parks and not just California Adventure, and what else can we expect from California Adventure?
Well, don't forget that we've also seen in Hong Kong, just in the past week or so, we've seen the Iron Man experience open, and I don't know if you've seen any videos of that's great fun. I mean, mind you, it's basically sort of a spiffy, or spiffed up version of Star Tours, the motion-based simulator thing, but again, married with 3D and putting you in the middle of a Marvel battle. That, my understanding is that, we are still in this weird space because of the master to licensing agreement that Marvel signed with Universal back in 1994. There has been, putting this in sort of an American Soviet terms, it's been a lessening of tensions, largely because Universal has realized that when they filled the stores at Marvel Superhero Island at Islands of Adventure with merchandise that's been created for the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, that stuff sells like hotcakes. So, they're perfectly happy to be supportive of, the characters being in Florida. In fact, just this summer, where we see the new, Spider-Man Homecoming movie, which, again, produced by Sony, but will feature, for example, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark. This kind of a favored nations thing going on here. So going forward, that there's more of a nuanced thing. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you walk around Marvel Superhero Island, there is artwork up of Doctor Strange, which in theory should mean that Doctor Strange should not be allowed to be in a Disney park. That he, because again, if you drill down into that deal, each individual character, there's an agreement signed for whether or not he can appear in an attraction, or whether or not he appears on the facade of a building, or whether or not he appears on even a menu board. All of that is very specific parts of the agreement. So the fact that you're kind of in that space where these characters can be in two parks, because I don't know if you saw just recently, Disney put out a survey where they were asking about which characters folks would like to be able to interact with at the parks. And, what was kind of interesting about it is they had one part of this online survey, which, by the way, was evidently sent out to a lot of folks in the UK, were the Pirates of the Caribbean characters, of course, Anna, Elsa, and the Disney princesses, but they also included the Guardians of the Galaxy characters and Spider-Man. So the fact that Disney's asking that question suggests that something has changed, especially when it comes to Spider-Man. So I guess all we can say at this point is watch this space, that there's something up. And I think the fact that everybody's making money off of what Disney's been doing with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, has Universal having a somewhat less, a hardball attitude toward this. It's just sort of like, if there's money on the table for all of us, then let's just maybe look the other way.
Jim, just what sort of figure can Disney get that all back off Universal? Financial figure?
Well, all right.
Can you quantify it?
Well, here's the problem. Okay. Now, you have to remember that when Disney bought Marvel in 2009, one of the things that Universal immediately, it's like, wait a minute, we have to, we have to change the deal, change the terms of our deal with Universal. Change it in terms of our deal with Marvel, because there was language in the deal that said that Marvel, because it was getting a chunk of the gate and a chunk of the food and a chunk of admission sales, it had access to all sorts of internal information for Universal, like the day-to-day attendance at the parks, stuff that Disney would dearly love to have. And, so during the actual, after the announcement and the finalizing of the deal, there was this basically siloing of information that, Disney could not have that info. And so that's what kind of makes quantifying problematic, because so much of this info is literally black boxed. That I've had folks at Universal speak in loose terms about this. But even they, just caution that, people are so freaked out about the fact that there's a Disney-owned property inside of a or a Universal theme park that everybody is, it's double secret probation time. That everybody's like that info's off limits.
Maybe.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah. So.
Who's next?
I'll go next. So, what do you think is in store for the Muppets in the coming years in the parks? Because we've had news recently about the Kermit balloon being taken away, but then we've got the Muppets having more of a presence in Epcot. And then we talked a little bit last week about how, kids now aren't as into the Muppets as what maybe like I was or Craig or Paul was when we were younger. Do you think the Muppets still have a place in the park, especially with Pizza Rizzo just opening?
Well, okay. A couple of things. Remember, Disney announced last fall or thereabouts, you've got a revival of the Muppet Babies television show coming on Disney Junior, and
Yes, we talked about that last week too.
Yeah, that's going to be pushed out to the 34 different Disney channels around the world. So honestly, Disney has not given up on the Muppets. If anything, and in fact, there's a number of people at ABC who, forgive the adult language, are very pissed that, that the new head of ABC programming, that's a woman who's worked with Shonda Rhimes, the woman who did Scandal and Grey's Anatomy and How to Get Away with Murder and all that. She basically shut down the Muppets because Shonda had created a show that was supposed to pick up where Romeo and Julia left off, Romeo and Juliet, not Romeo and Julio. Now that would be interesting. But no, that was supposed to debut this season on ABC. It turns out it's way behind schedule. It won't make it to 2018 or the 2017-2018 season. So basically, the Muppets were killed for no reason at all. In fact, right up until the afternoon that it was announced that they were canceled, the bet in-house was, well, of course, we're going to pick it up for a second season. I mean, they're in the parks and, Disney Consumer Products, it's all this stuff put together. But this woman, shut the show down to make room for this additional hour-long drama, which then wasn't produced in time to make it for the 2016-2017 season. So talking with the folks on the Muppet side of the fence, there are definitely other Muppet projects in the works. And in fact, what's kind of interesting is there's stuff in the works for ABC, but they're also having conversations with like Netflix. In fact, that's another argument in-house that basically, if they had been smart enough to do the new Muppet show strictly for Netflix, so it was a piece of straight tube to every Muppet fan on the planet, they'd not only have produced series 2 by now, but they'd have already greenlit the 3rd season. Okay, so looking at what they just did for Pizza Rizzo, I know a lot of folks are kind of, it's not terribly Muppety, but the hard reality is that restaurant was built that way because when Star Wars Experience opens and people find that they can't get into the 2 highly themed Star Wars restaurants, they're going to be looking for a place to eat in the immediate vicinity. And Rizzo's literally going to be right down the street. It's in fact, it was actually Seth Kabursky of the Orlando Weekly who pointed this out, but people don't pick up on the fact that they basically doubled the size of the kitchen. So they anticipate that they're going to need that extra, capacity to feed all those hungry Star Wars fans who aren't able to eat in this port city out on the rim. It's kind of sort of like what they did with Tiffin's at Disney's Animal Kingdom. I mean, here's this wonderful restaurant that isn't doing nearly the business it should right now because, of course, Pandora, the World of Avatar isn't open. But once that opens, that restaurant's just going to get slammed. But yeah, I anticipate on the back of Muppet Babies, which Disney Junior, it's going to push with all of its might. I don't know if you'll see the Muppets back necessarily on the movie screen anytime soon, but anticipate television in the parks. I guess a lot will depend on how the baby show does. I know that Parks is already sort of looking at, could they do something similar to, say, the Liberty Square show? Would people, say, gather down, back where the Phineas and Ferb thing was, the meet and greet in, the Muppets area, and, say, have the Muppet Baby characters lean out the window and, do a show for you there. That's the Liberty Square show has been ridiculously successful. Mm-hmm. Having talked with the folks who put that together, they'd love to circle back and do some other shows or even create a seasonal version of those shows. So again, they have their fans in the company, but the other hard reality here is that, they're not necessarily at the top of the list. I mean, Disney is obviously prioritizing bringing Star Wars to the parks, and we just talked about what they're trying to do with the Marvel characters. And let's not forget, you've got Incredibles 2 making through the pipeline, and Cars 3, which will be out in theaters in less than 6 months. There's a lot of already established franchises that, frankly, are ahead of Kermit and Fozzie and Piggy on the list.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like even if they just gave Muppet Vision a little bit of a refresh, and maybe they linked in things from the films in it instead, like the more recent films, I feel like that would get more of a younger audience wanting to go to it.
I agree. But here's actually one of the big problems. Muppet Vision 3D is basically, well, I mean, there was a television special called The Muppets Go to Walt Disney World, which you can watch catch on YouTube these days. But Muppet Vision was the second to the last Muppet project that Jim Henson ever worked on. And for a lot of folks in the company who actually worked with Jim on this, it borders on sacrilege to touch that. And what's kind of funny is that in years previous, there's actually been some talk, for example, of doing a cut down version of a Muppet Christmas Carol, taking it out and having it dimensionalized so it could play in the 3D format. But I guess they tried to get it down to a 12 to 15 minute running time, and it got kind of incoherent. So no, there have been conversations about, could we do a new film? I mean, but let me be blunt here. One of the other reasons they would have been talking about doing a new film is in much the same way as they took, O Canada in, the Circle Vision film and changed that out. They went from a 15-minute version to an 11-minute version. Mm-hmm. They were looking to do the same thing, that if we did a new Muppet show, could we make it shorter so we could get more people through that theater per hour? And it's, I don't know, as somebody, who kind of, don't get me wrong, I think Eric Jacobson does wonderful work as Miss Piggy, but I kind of miss Frank Oz's take on it, which is, but we're kind of in that space now. We're losing a lot of the people who worked with Jim, who originally voiced these characters. And, I think, it was Family Guy that did the great joke about, this is what happens when things go wrong. You get bad sounding Muppets. So,
I mean, I feel like anything at this point would just be a help to get more of a presence of them in the park. And I have heard really good things about the Magic Kingdom show, and I was surprised when I saw them coming out in Epcot. Mm-hmm. And that's why I was even more surprised to see the Kermit balloon going. But I understand that you'd see that from Star Wars Land, so it wouldn't make any sense to keep it.
Yeah, in fact, I guess there was, I get a couple of Imagineers who, but it's been death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, people forget that it was only 3 or 4 years ago that, when they repainted the balloon and took Jim Henson's name off of it. Because in fact, it's kind of interesting because the Henson Company today, even today when they're out promoting things, people will ask them about the Muppets and they have to flat out say, we don't own the Muppets anymore. They belong to, to the Walt Disney Company. I mean, we're the ones who are doing Sid the Science Kid or Dinosaur Train, but you're talking Kermit, Piggy, and Fozzie, that's Disney.
Yeah.
So that's why they took Jim's name off of the balloon. But I guess there were some jokes within Imagineering that could we paint it to look like the Death Star? It's just sort of, but
paint one side of it, it'll be fine.
Yeah, and it's just sort of like, no, it comes down, guys. So.
No. I feel like it's going to be really sad walking into that area and not seeing it.
Yeah, I know. And, but again, that's, you're going to remember that even back when Walt was running it, he made a point of stressing that these places are not museums. In fact, if you look at the lineup of attractions that Disneyland had from 55, July of 55 when it opened, to December of 66 when we lost Walt, I mean, he changed that park all the time. He was always looking to give people who came to the park new experiences. So the fact that, if you think about it, Muppet Vision opened in, May of 1990, and this is 2017. So it's over 25 years of basically looking the same and being the same movie. That kind of runs counter to the way the guy who set this place up would have run it. So.
Exactly. Well, I mean, on that point, we've seen an awful lot of changes in the parks in the last 5 years. We've had New Fantasyland, we've had half of Hollywood Studios taken out. How do you see the park in the next 5 years? What do you think is going to be different other than Avatar?
Well, I mean, Bob Chapek, the current head of Parks and Resorts, has been pretty open about what he wants to do to Epcot. I mean, he wants it to be relevant. He wants it to be more family friendly, which means more IP. I mean, he's that we're going to see that park. I think you're going to start to see an aggressive 5-year program at that park kick in the next year or so. Excuse me. And we'd mentioned, I don't think you had been on the podcast at that point, but there is a long-term plan for Animal Kingdom to also bring in Zootopia,
right,
in some form, replacing Rafiki's Planet Watch. And again, my apologies. And it's kind of funny, on the heels of Rivers of Light finally, it looks like, getting out of the gate, but given the somewhat lackadaisical reaction to that, and the fact that Moana is so popular and features characters on boats, that I guess we shouldn't be all that surprised if a couple of years down the line this very animal friendly show kind of fades and is replaced by something like Moana. But that's just the way the modern Disney company operates. That when you're going to the board of directors and you're asking for tens or sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to build new rides, attractions, or lands, it's so much easier to get the funding if you can pull the research and say it's built around this IP, and I can tell you how much plush we sold last year that based on those characters, and how well the DVD sold, and that's how these characters trend, and that's kind of the world we live in. So I don't know, we're going to see a lot of brand new, previously unseen things going into the parks. I know for a fact a lot of the stuff that's going into Epcot in the next 5 years is, character driven, and a lot of that is on the back of how well Frozen Ever After has done. That how that has changed who goes to that park and when. I mean, there's a lot of little girls who get up first thing in the morning and just jump on their parents, and it's like, we are going to Epcot. I need to see Anna and Elsa, and they do it.
Exactly. And Frozen is a very good ride. I will admit that I was disappointed when they announced that Maelstrom was going to close and they were going to replace it with Frozen, and I was like, oh no, what are Epcot doing? It's a bad idea. And then as soon as I got to the Norway Pavilion in September, I was like, okay, I totally agree with everything that Epcot's doing. If they want to put an IP in every single country, I agree with it, because they've done such a good job.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because between right now it looks like the Ratatouille ride that was created for Disneyland Paris will be built right next door to the France Pavilion. They'll just sort of extend the land between there's an expansion pad right between Morocco and France that if you go backstage behind that little berm there, that's actually where all of the food kiosks for food and wine and to a lesser extent flower and garden are kept when they're not out front. They just park them out there. But that's supposedly where the Ratatouille building would be built. And my understanding is based on how Coco does this fall. That's the Pixar film that'll be coming out in November that's based around Day of the Dead. What they'd be looking to do is if you look right next door to the Mexico Pavilion, you notice you've got the Odyssey restaurant, which has basically stood empty. I mean, they open it every now and then for seminars or special events or that sort of thing, but it stood empty. And it's like the thinking is bump the border out for Mexico and go in that direction. Though there is a cheaper version of this ride that could just go in and replace the Three Caballeros, which of course is a redo of the old River of Time. But again, that kind of depends on how Coco does it at the box office this fall.
I feel like I would really enjoy a ride based around that. I mean, I always do kind of hope that they'll bring the Odyssey restaurant back to how it was in the 90s, where they have like the show with like Mickey and Donald and everybody. But if they were going to expand it to make a ride there, I'd be happy with that. Yeah,
and of course, there's the Guardians thing that's going to Universe of Energy is basically going to go away, and it with a weird energy overlay, we're going to get sort of a Guardians themed experience down there. But again, this is all about trying to make this park a park that you really do want to go to. I mean, Disney's own surveys suggest that for a lot of people, Epcot is the park they go to in the late afternoon because A, they're looking to get dinner, and B, they want to hang out and see Illuminations.
I agree with that. Epcot is my favorite Disney park, but I won't go in the morning just because I know that there's so many people all wanting to ride Test Track and Soarin', and it gets very, very crowded. So I do tend to go later in the afternoon, but I would much rather go there than any other Disney park. Yeah. And so if they're going to fill it with more things for people to do, that'll eat up a little bit of the crowd. It's just going to get better.
Well, and speaking of which, though, I don't know if you've been hearing about this Mary Poppins Returns that's about to begin production. But this is a live-action film. Will be out for Christmas of 2018, and I guess they're already having discussions about doing something of size built around that film for the UK pavilion.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm not entirely, enthusiastic about it, or at least I wasn't when they first announced it, but they've done a couple of things that are very smart gestures. Like, I don't know if you've heard, but Dick Van Dyke's actually going to make an appearance in this thing.
Right.
Yeah, supposedly he's going to be playing the son of the old banker from the first film. So they're going to put him in old age. Of course, now they're not going to have to use quite so much old age music.
No.
Also, Angela Lansbury is going to be in it. And,
wow.
And evidently they're actually having conversations with Julie Andrews, about whether or not she'd be willing to appear in it. And I think one of the ideas they floated is having her play the Bird Woman, so it's going to be interesting, but it's going to be a really big deal for Disney, and they're going to want to really walk this out into the parks. And if it succeeds, you really don't be surprised to see a huge presence for this character and from this film at the UK at Epcot.
And that would be great. I always feel like the UK pavilion needs something, because I know that they have the bands that play Years in the Night, and they do have Mary Poppins out and about every now and again, but I always feel like it just needs something more.
Well, if you actually go back to the original plans for, you have to understand, everything you see now is phase one, that if you actually walk back to that garden area where they have the band play and, sort of look off to the right, and it's like there's this kind of empty space.
Yeah.
That was where they were supposed to build this combination Crystal Palace English music hall. And, they literally, you were going to be able to go in there and see a classic English music hall show. And, and they would change it out, for the various time of year. So you could get, for example, when it came time for the holidays, you'd get a holiday pantomime. So, they do Aladdin or something in there.
Oh.
And but again, this was the plan, in 1982, and then of course Disney management changed in October of 1984, and so many of these ideas they never circled back on. There was a time, interestingly enough, though, that before they built the World Showplace thing, that giant tent thing that's out behind or between Canada and Epcot, they were supposed to do basically a magical park that you'd come up to something. In fact, it was sort of the outside of it was kind of modeled on the park you saw from Mary Poppins, and you wandered through the space, and what was supposed to happen was that it was going to be the ultimate Disney meet and greet, but the gimmick was that inside this beautiful little British park, you'd come around a corner and here's Alice and the White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland, and you'd go around another corner and here's Peter Pan and Wendy, and you'd go around another corner and here's the characters from Robin Hood, and you go around another corner and finally here's Bert and Mary, and it was all of and I think you actually exited through the 100 Acre Woods with Winnie the Pooh, but the gimmick of it was all of these characters that are based on pieces of great British literature were all in one place, and you could have this massive meet and greet, in this beautiful English park.
That would be lovely.
It would have been lovely. And I remember seeing the site plan back in the day, and it's like, wow, that's killer. And it's like, you're going to do that? It's like, nope, we're going to build a giant tent that we can rent out to corporations and make money off of. And,
oh, no.
And that's kind of, how a lot of the Disney stories end these days. So.
Oh.
So on that note, I think we've taken enough of your time, Jim. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic. Craig and Amanda, thank you for joining me. And on that note, we'll be back probably in a week or two, I would imagine. Thank you very much, and good night.
Bye.
Right, and so for our other sponsor of the show, we have Wendy Prater at Magical Journeys Travel.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
The very beautiful looking Wendy Prater. Is she on your to-do list? Like if you meet her in real life, you're allowed to.
She's, when you open the wallet.
Yeah.
She's the picture in my wallet.
I get you. But other than our lust for Wendy, her and her Magical Journeys are there to help you plan your next Disney vacation. So whether that's a Disney cruise or a trip to Disney World, Wendy can help you by getting your reservations at midnight, getting those all-important Be Our Guest dining reservations or meet and greets with Anna and Elsa. And I think if you quote this podcast, Craig, get a bit of a discount on your deposit, don't you?
Yeah, $25 off, yeah.
There you go. So, next time you want to book a holiday, give Wendy at Magical Journey Travels a little tinkle at wpmagicjourneys.com or on Twitter at wpmagicjourneys.
God bless Wendy and all that sailing it.
Sorry I'm late, guys. Got stuck in traffic and had to make a bit of a dash for it. Jim, I just wanted to ask you a question. Jim? Paul? Craig? Amanda? Oh, but...
This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast. This podcast is part of the After Dark Podcast.